Hello everyone, my name is Cedric Schultz.
I'm Patrick Lindwall.
And I'm Chad Martin.
And we are Group 3. Today we'll be discussing the ethics presentation of Gilbane Gold, which basically follows the town of Gilbane. So the town of Gilbane is it's special because the gold refers to their new program of basically turning sewage water into fertilizer for their plants. In fact, this has been so productive for the town of Gilbane that they've actually sold so much that's offset taxes that has saved the average family of four $300 a month. So it's very important for, it's a new development basically that has proved very, very productive. So in order to maintain this level of gold, so to speak, they've imposed 10 times more strict regulations than what the federal government requires on like waste disposal and basically keeping toxic elements out of the sewage. So, but beforehand, before they imposed all these very strict regulations, they had marketed themselves as like a tax haven or a business-friendly zone, and basically provided like tax cuts, things like that for companies so that they'd be more competitive as to bring more businesses into the town. So some of the new companies included Z Corp, which is a very large-scale manufacturing plant. They're known for manufacturing like computer parts, things like that, with like very high amounts of like heavy metals, things that would be toxic to the environment. And so in order to meet the requirements set by the very strict regulations, they've had to up the amount of like filler content in order to make the percent or the ratio for the amount of disposal, like heavy metal disposal that they're allowed to make. So it's in parts per million. So by increasing the number of let's say water in a solution, they would be able to meet that requirement. So following this, there's a new test that comes out that Z Corp gets their hands on, and they find out that they're actually breaking those regulations set by the town of Gilbane. And that goes into the fact, that's where you come in. Basically, you're the new employee, David, who comes into, basically acquires this test. He now knows that the company is possibly breaking regulations and is possibly like harming the ecosystem and the environment around the town, things like that. So another thing to mention that's worth mentioning is the previous environmental engineering contractor was recently let go. So that basically means that the person before you were basically hired was basically let go because he knew about the new test. He knew about the practices of the company were actually harmful to the environment, things like that.
So if David didn't disclose to the town what was going on at Z Corp, he'd be breaking a few of the ASME fundamental canons. The first of which was that engineers should care most about the well-being of the people. That includes the people of Gilbane who'd be eating these crops that were fertilized with the contaminated fertilizer. Another one is that the engineers should consider environmental ramifications of their actions. In this case, it's obviously going to be horrible for the environment, and if he doesn't do anything about it, the situation is going to get worse for Gilbane, and it would destroy the quality of the crops. It also states that engineers should only associate with reputable organizations. That covers Z Corp because they've been acting a little shady in firing the last person in his position for talking about it and for not disclosing more accurate tests to the city.
So the group has multiple perspectives on multiple outcomes that could come from this scenario. First of which is to put David in a very hard position. He is a new hire. He's still young in his career. He wants to do the best for the company. And he also has to remember that he did just get his PE, and any actions he makes could affect him for the rest of the life. the last thing he'd want to do at this stage in the game is do something that would affect his license. But in that scenario, he also does have to remain ethical. Z Corp currently is meeting the regulations by pumping more water through, which might make the regulations look right, but it's still the same amount of heavy metals that are going into the waste and then eventually into the food and plants that are grown with the fertilizer. So that's a very iffy situation. Legally, we think David isn't doing anything too wrong because the town only requires that he signs off on the old tests, and the old tests aren't falsified. They are accurate readings to the extent of the old tests. But now, since he knows that they are in fact going over with the amount of toxins, he should push the company to act upon that. One, because the town may eventually come back and start requiring the new tests, and two, just because it is what is appropriate for the people. The specifications for the solid waste have been set in place for a reason. They know that's the maximum that could be discharged and still not be harmful to the environment. And right now, even though it appears as if they are not going over it, they are, and David should push hard to get the toxins down so that he is not endangering the community. And Gilbane should provide Z Corp with some benefits. The reason they force these strict regulations is so that they can sell the fertilizer to benefit the town, but they're not giving any sort of benefit to the company themselves. It was stated that any sort of improvement to the waste was going to be extremely expensive for the company, so some sort of financial gain from Gilbane to Z Corp could help a lot in solving this tricky scenario. Thank you for listening to our ethics presentation.